Hello, welcome to the August 22nd, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14. Also, if you're running on Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. If you don't see an immediate response to your particular question, realize that my ability to answer the questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions, but we will go through them chronologically as asked. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. And we, as mentioned before, we will have our index several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, it's over 40,000 different topics. You can go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They do this to make it a better community experience. So we'll give special thanks to them. And there's also, we'll give special thanks and kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community, different links and tutorials and downloads that are available there. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from the United States outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, we see Uno Memento checking in from Finland, wishing everyone a happy Friday. We see Stefan joining from Sweden. We see Val from Vienna, Austria. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We have Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. We see Suede TV and Recording Studio from New Jersey. Gobe, or let me know if I'm mispronouncing that. Gobe Berg, sending greetings from Austria. All right, and we see Jan from Cubase Index on from Stockholm. We see Mark Winslow sending aloha from Honolulu. It sounds like a great place to be now. All right, and we have Jorge joining us from Portugal. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is taking a nap at the top of his cat tree, but he'll wave on Buddy's behalf to all the other pets that are nearby. All right, so we see from Star Child, says why the last version of Cubase crashes older version Cubase projects. So usually if it's going to be, I haven't come across that in my experience. Usually if something like that is happening, it could be related to a particular third-party plugin. So let me know, like, if you start the program. So when you start Cubase, one of the options that you have is to just come over and I'll start Nuendo this way. If you hold down like the Alt Control Shift, so I'll just come over here. Just exit out real quick, sorry, missed it. All right, so we come here, hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift, depending upon your operating system. So start the program, hold those 3 keys down, and see if you get the option to deactivate third-party plugins, and see if you're still kind of getting the crashes. And if you can let me know, like, if you're using third-party plugins, or if you get an indication of what is causing the crash. But sometimes you might have to update other plugins on your system. But so if you give me a little more information, I'd be happy to kind of dive into it a little bit. And if you have a project that you wanted to share with me, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to take a look at it. So you could do like some type of sharing service. All right. Okay, you see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Derek Smith saying hello to all from Germany. All right, we have Fabian Dobrowski, I believe, yeah. So we have Tony Trunzo from Australia, Marvin Earl from Rhode Island, Benny from Sweden, Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo says, I see, I'm not sure if this is, maybe I'm catching the second half of your questions. Tim, let me just see, I'm not sure if I saw from Tim Weinheimer, says, as WAV files so I can play them on my MP3 player. I'm using Windows 11. So let me know if, maybe I missed the first part of the question, Tim. If you want to re-enter the question again, just so I could answer it for you. All right, so we see Val is Y42 has some questions that's come up in the last few days. All right. All right, so we see, can we cut over, so this is from Val, so first question, can we cut overlapping of clips events if they are on different tracks? Maybe a macro project logical editor. Okay, so let's go ahead and create. I think we did kind of maybe a macro for this recently. So let's say we have something along these lines where we have overlapping events. So see if I remember kind of what we did. All right, so. All right, so let's say if we go to this event here, and this could be contingent on if it's above, starting from above or below, but let's see if we could, I think we could do it in a macro. So let's try to make a new macro. Okay, so if I have these two tracks, I want to so we're going to navigate the cursor. think we could do, let's say, to start of event. Let me just look under transport here. Bear with me. Okay, so we'll say locate selection start. Let's add that command. Then we're going to navigate up. Add that command. Let's split the event. Let's just say split under edit. Add that command. We're going to locate. Let's see if I do this. I'm just going to manually do it here. So let's say if I split. Okay, so we go to okay, so let me just try what we have so far. So let's say my position is here. And let me run the macro. So I'm going to start here at this particular event. Okay, let's see if we start with this event selected. Let's see if I remove that. So let's say we want to navigate up. And let me just okay, so we have that. Now let's locate selection end. Let's add that command. Okay, let's navigate down. And let's split at cursor again. Okay, so if I come here, I'll just okay, so let's run what we have here as a macro. So do this. All right, let me remove. Let's try these steps here. Let me play around, but I think I could do it in a macro for you, Val. And I could have it kind of dialed in for Tuesday's live stream if that's okay. I just don't want to spend like 20 minutes just on kind of getting this, but I could get that dialed in. But let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, is just to kind of cut this off, navigate to the beginning of this, and cut this off here, kind of the overlapping parts. But you might be able, let's see if we also just, if we change our grid to event, if we come so, but I'll play around with it and see if I get the macro kind of dialed in. Sorry about that. I'll have it dialed in for Tuesday's live stream. Okay, we see Michael Pierce joining from Grand Chapel Studios. All right, Derek Smith says, hi, Greg. I just bought Cubase 14 Pro. Thanks for joining us on the live stream today. He says, I don't have or cannot seem to find VariAudio. What can I do? Okay, so if we have 14 Pro, VariAudio isn't necessarily like a plugin, but it's part of the sample editor. So if I come over here, let's say we have our vocals kind of laid out for us. We go into the sample editor here. And if you click again, you can see that the inspector tab will switch between kind of the channel inspector. And if you click on the event or double click on the event, this will go to the particular, this will show you all the contents of the sample editor. And you'll see a tab here that says VaryAudio. So once we have VaryAudio selected, we can click on Analyze, and then that would automatically open up the VaryAudio editor. So it's not like a separate plugin. It's actually truly integrated in with the Cubase editing environment. So if you're kind of looking for a plugin of VaryAudio, it's more of an editing component that's built into Cubase. So again, just come over here. You could just double click on the event that will launch it into the sample editor, and often just switch the inspector over for you, expose the VaryAudio tab, then you could click on VaryAudio, and then you could do all of your audio editing as needed. Just gonna check my audio connections here real quick. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, so you see Tim Weinheimer says there is a first part of the question. Yeah, so maybe if you could just retype it in, that'd be great. All right, so we see Nick joining. Says can't stay, but feel compelled to pop in and whack the like button. It's great to see you on the live stream, Nick. We hope you're well. All right, so Pastoral Apologetic says back from Europe and excited to be in the right time zone for the stream. We hope you had a wonderful vacation. Okay, so we see Tim Weinheimer says I have a CD with a 0 track that won't import correctly into the computer. I used Wavelab Pro 12, ripped the files into Wavelab. Now I want to export the CD WAV files back into the computer on Windows. So I'm not sure if having a track 0 is actually Redbook compliant. So I know sometimes people would put hidden tracks kind of on the end, but you know, it may not be a Redbook compliant like audio CD if you start with track 0. So it's just open up Wavelab. Sometimes it could be people could do clever things in. I don't have a CD drive connected to my laptop anymore, but let me just come over here and let's just go to okay, so if we were to come here, I believe that the Redbook standard would just be, so let's say if we come here to our basic audio CD, it's always going to kind of start at track 1. So it might not be a Redbook standard CD, but let me know if it says I used Wavelab Pro 12 and ripped the files into Wavelab. Now I want to export CD WAV files back into computer on Windows. So let me know if you're able to extract the audio CD in Wavelab but not in Cubase. It says I want to export the WAV files back into the computer, but you know, once we have kind of extracted the files, it should be okay, but it could be like in a non-Redbook compliant CD. So if you could let me know that information, Tim, that'd be helpful. All right, so we have Lord L. Palazzo ask, hi Greg, my MediaBay is acting like crazy, taking too long to give me preview. Is there any way to reset it so it can work as new? All right, let me just jump back to Cubase here. All right, so if we're, you know, make sure one, there is, so if you're in, let's say the full MediaBay here, just get this open. All right, you know, there are like some different presets or preferences. So say if you get to your preferences or settings and go to MediaBay, you'll see one that says, okay, you want to scan folders only when MediaBay is open. So that's probably a good one to have unchecked. And then you could also have it not scan for unknown file types. Check to see if in your control room, because usually the preview is going to be, you know, if you're doing like a MIDI, you know, let's say if we're previewing a, let me just come over here. Let's say we go to our VST sound and we say, let's see if it's okay. So I go to SQL content. So if it's going to be like a MIDI loop or like an instrument sound, sometimes presets for instruments may have to actually kind of be loaded up. So let's say if I just want to come here, we'll select all of our MIDI loops. So if I do this and I go to preview, then it has to kind of load the piano instrument up. So depending on the content, so usually audio is pretty fast because it doesn't have to load a subsequent instrument. But if you're kind of previewing sounds like that contain large samples, those files where the sound has to be loaded into the instrument in the background for it to be previewed may take longer. Also, one other thing to check is the preview is also going through inserts. That could be if you have inserts in the control room, see if you take those inserts out, if that makes a difference as well. So a couple things to try there. All right. We see Captenergy Music from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us and being online. We see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so Jorge asks, hi, Cubase 14 Pro, Windows 11, hope not repeated. How can I automate knobs on a Synth VST to activate or rotate at sometimes only, not all the times, independent from LFOs? All right, so let's say if I come over here, we could just say, okay, I want... all right, so say we grab. Okay, so I'll just solo this particular track and I'll do a pattern. So, so we could just automate the parameters inside of the plugin itself. So let me just come over here and say, okay, I want to do we'll just do a quick step pattern. All right, so let's say we have this pattern going on a bunch of times. So let's say we'll come here. And we just want to kind of control, like, let's see, just so automate knobs on the Synth VST to activate and rotate. All right, so here I just have a MIDI remote. Let me see if it's... Okay, so I'm just going to put this on my kind of focus quick controls here. So I'm going to open up the instrument, and like I could just automate the instrument itself. So let's say as we're going on here, and now if I want to, so now we'll go ahead and kind of play back with the automation. I'll read the automation here. So that way I could just use like my focus quick control knobs, and as soon as I just hit play and we automate within the plugin, then those different parameters that we controlled or just recorded, and we don't have to have it constantly going on like what we would normally do with like modulators. I could just take completely different parts. So even if I just wanted to grab, let's say we'll come here, play. So if I want to write automation, let's say on the attack, and now when we go back, we could we'll see just moving that parameter. We've just automated that parameter. So just kind of hitting play and automating and using like a remote control or just moving with the mouse, that should allow you to kind of just automate, knobs and parameters only in specific parts. Okay. Reading through comments here. All right, so we see Michael Teams is giving Michael Pierce 1 gallon of coconut almond ice cream. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Hope you're well. Uno Mementos received 1 gallon of strawberry ice cream. All right, cross-side VidVault says, are you able to show quickly how to access and use the scopes/analyzing tools for checking a mix? Yeah, so let's take a look at it. All right, so one of the plugins that you're going to have is called SuperVision, and SuperVision has all sorts of pretty amazing meters and different tools. So one is, we could check kind of our signal level, and if I wanted to, we could have like up to, I think, 9 different meter windows. So but if I wanted to add a meter kind of on the side here, I can say, okay, this one, I want to see my levels. And I want this under the signal category to see my VU meters. So if we come over here, we could just say, I want this to be full scale. All right, and if we so we could kind of look for levels if we want to add another. So depending on the scale, we could also have like our meters go vertically or horizontally. But if I wanted to look for different levels here, we could also just go to under our measurement. We could see, okay, what our overall loudness is. So we could kind of resize all these meters. Let's come over, let's say, and let's add a meter in the bottom, and let's check for phase. So I could come over and kind of in our phase area, so we could have a phase scope. So let's say if I was listening and we saw this scope go kind of very horizontal, that would indicate that we have kind of like a phase issue overall. So let me see if I could replicate that on this, like if we're having phase problems in our mix. kind of hard to show in this case without phase. And if you had phase issues on particular frequencies, we could also add another meter at the bottom to kind of determine which frequencies. So if we go to phase here, we could actually see, okay, we have a multi-correlation. And here we could see if there's any particular frequencies that are kind of out of phase. So you could kind of find the particular culprits that could be causing phase issues. If we wanted to look at some of the other, we could see time. We could also see kind of like an oscilloscope if you wanted to see that, or if you want to see kind of the waveform of how everything is. Like you see kind of a wave scope, so you can see like the effect of the amplitude on the waveform if you want to, and you could have that horizontal as well, or a wave circle, so you can see that. Kind of you can see like different correlations. So if I just wanted to come over here, so these can all kind of point out, if you want to see like your spectrum curve, so you can see what frequencies, or if we want to add a spectrum bar to this, where we could actually kind of see the particular frequencies that are going on. Or if you think there's a lot of intensity in particular frequency ranges, there's a frequency kind of intensity, so you can see where the brighter colors are. You'll have kind of different, that's where there's going to be more intensity on a particular frequency. So lots of incredible metering tools that people often spend more than the price of Cubase for to get. Just a part of Cubase that could really kind of point out phase issues, loudness issues very easily using SuperVision. All right. You see everyone's happy to see Nick back on. All right, we have Michael Jensen sending greetings from Jensen Studios in Denmark. Thanks for joining us today and being part of the community. We see Derek Smith says, thanks, Greg. It's exactly what I want. This. All right. So we see Brian Sawyer says 10 more containers of studio gear to find a place for. So yeah, Brian's relocating his studio from North Carolina to Yuma, Arizona. So. All right, and Michael Teams has granted Brian 1 gallon of Texas fresh cantaloupe ice cream. That sounds like a good flavor. All right, so you see from Tim K, says, I can relate to laptops without. I got myself a little Toshiba USB CD DVD RW drive for nearly nothing. I can't say I use the thing much, but every time I do, I can't imagine what I do without it. So yeah, my personal studio computer, I still have a CD DVD drive. Comes in handy. All right, so we see John McDonough Music saying a late hello from Hamburg, New Jersey. Thanks for joining. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see from Shabra Deep, how to set Steinberg power scheme in Cubase Pro 14. So on the Windows platform, it's not on the Mac OS, but if you go to your studio menu to studio setup, and I think if you go to your audio system, you'd see like the advanced options here, and then you'll see an option on a Windows platform for use Steinberg power scheme. So you could just do it from right there. All right, we have RFB checking in from the Netherlands. All right, so Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of cookies and cream ice cream. All right. We see Jay from Secret Studios on. Okay. Just reading through comments. So we see for Secret Studios, hi Greg, I purchased an expression map pack and it's breaking my brain installing all of them. Is there no way to point Cubase to a folder or drag and drop them in? Also, will there be, so when you when you come over, you could just say, so if you bought like an expression map pack, just when you go to like your expression setup, so let's say we go to your expression map setup, all you have to do is, just load, and then you could have them all in a particular folder that you want. So, so once you're in the expression map editor, load up the particular expression maps that you want, right from there. So there's a good chance if you bought like a whole pack that maybe you have expression maps that, for other instruments that you don't have. So, maybe don't copy those in, but you can, but all you have to do here is just, load and just, load that expression map. And then if you save it with your instrument as a track preset, that expression map will automatically be recalled when you load up the instrument. All right, so we have Andrew Fox from Ireland joining. So he's going to be listening back mostly this afternoon. Okay, so we see just a continuation from Jay, who just says, I purchased the expression map pack and it's breaking my brain installing all of them. There's no way to point to the folder, drag and drop them in. Also, they will be lost when the project is closed. Are they now global? So, so what I would do is just simply, again, come over. So let's say if we're doing a new project here, right? And I'll just, so the expression maps will always be kind of stored within the project. But let's say I'm going to add an instrument track. Let's do like a Hallian Sonic here. Then we'll just load up like an Iconicus sketch. So let's say we want to do like an expression map. So I'm going to come over here. All right. So I will get to my expression map editor. I will import the key switches because Hallian is smart that way. So now that I've imported the key switches, I could save this as a track preset. And so we'll just come here. Okay, so now I just want to, we can see that when we go to like an event on here, that the expression map is populated already. So I'm going to save this as a track preset. So we'll just right click, save track preset. So let's call this our secret cello. Okay, so I'm going to remove this particular track, or I'll just close this project, and we'll do a brand new empty project. So we know that it's not resident in memory. So when I come over here to my media, let's go to our user presets, track presets, VST instruments, and I see secret cello. So just drag and drop that over. That instrument is loaded up. When we go to the editor, all of the articulations, the expression map is already loaded. So once you load it up once, save it as a track preset, save it in your template, and then all those functions will be available and recallable immediately for you, just like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. All right, you see Randy from Radar the Band just saying greetings to all. Okay, so we see kind of clarification from Tim Weinheimer. Says, I've imported all of the files in Wavelab successfully with the right markers. So all I need to do is set the track order and export WAV files back into the computer. Okay, so let's say let's jump back to Wavelab. So let's say if okay, so let's say, these are our files that were imported, let's say from our CD. So I think if we just go to so generally, so let's say if you want to, let's see if we could just render these files here. So I'm just going to click on render, and we can say we want to do the whole montage. And I think if we if it's in, let me know if it's in a montage. So you probably have something that looks along the lines of this, maybe, if you have them in a montage. So it should have extracted it directly, to your particular location. But let's say if we have like all these as separate files, let's come over. So I think when we come over here, we could say, I want to do all. Okay, let me just undo that. Okay, so let's see if we go to our render here. So I'm not sure if you have them in a montage or not. All right, so let's say we'll do all titles here. I want to put it into location. All Alright, so we're going to select our destination folder. Let's put it onto our desktop. Let's say new folder. Alright, let me just select everything here real quick. Okay, so now let's go render, and we'll say all selected tracks. Let's see if that. I think that this will rate the files to the CD. Let's see if we could watch it populate. So we can see track 1. We'll see probably track 2 coming in. Then you could also just check kind of reveal and finder there. Looks like it's still all kind of one single file here for everything. Let me try the render options one more time. Let's try all selected clips and see. Okay, so I think all selected clips, if you have the clips like in a montage, then let's go back to our Finder, and we can see that now these are all being kind of populated as separate files. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Tim. So once we go to the render button in Wavelab, let it complete its process here. Cancel the last one, but now when we go back, we could see that all of the tracks are individually rendered out to new locations. Let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, Tim. Okay. So you see from Tiago, just says, Greg, there's something wrong with my free warp markers. Sometimes they do not stay in the exact position that they are placed in the first time. I always put a marker before and after my warp edit help. All right, so let's take a look. All right. Okay, so let's say we're doing kind of warp editing here. All right, so let's say we're in free warp. I'm going to just say I want to do warp editing. All right, so when you do this, you need kind of like a warp marker before and after to make sure that those are kind of serving as anchors when we do kind of warp editing. So if we don't have an anchor, so you said that you always kind of put it before and after, but if there's no, so I haven't really seen it moving unless it's specifically moved here. I'm not sure if maybe if you quantized, if we have this event selected and quantize, that when we quantize and we switch back to our warp markers, that those might have shifted. So let's say I move this to beat 1, that warp marker there, but I quantize this to quarter notes. And let's say if I had that quantized, that could shift the warp markers around depending on like your quantization. If you accidentally left it quantized, that could do it. But it seems like, those are anchored, but make sure you didn't accidentally maybe have the audio event selected when you quantized perhaps something else, and the audio event got quantized along with it. That could cause the warp markers to move unexpectedly. And let me know if the warp marker itself is moving or the event itself is warping with the warp marker. So if you see the yellow event move out of position, or if it looks like it has been warped, and the warp marker relative to the waveform is still in the same spot, but it looked like it was warped. So if it looks like it was warped, it might have been accidentally quantized. Okay, wonderful to see Soren on, checking in from Sweden. All right, so Nick has to scoot. He has children to feed and wants everyone to have a great weekend. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right. Okay, so we see from Tim Weinheimer says, yes, but not sure how to set up the montage in Wavelab with all the tracks together to get the outcome that you did. All right, so let's say if we want to add tracks in the montage, so we'll show you how to do that quickly. All right, so let's just get to montage here. And create empty. Okay, so we have kind of like an empty montage. So if we just come over, let's right click into montage and we're going to say insert files. We could look for a particular folder. So let's say the files that we just created on a desktop under Tim CD, I believe is what we called it. So now I could kind of select all the files here, and we could open. And if we wanted to, we could put these to different lanes or to different tracks. But now when we do this, we could also kind of stagger if you want. But let's say if I just want to put these, again, I will just come over to I'm going to select all the tracks here. If I hold down my shift key correctly this time. All right, so we could just line up on the active track, and now all the files have been put into the montage here. I'll just, so if we just come here, here's my individual files. And so once again, once you have an empty montage, just come over here and say insert audio file. You could browse and you could open the file selector and choose your folder and say, okay, I want to take these particular files here. We could line them up all on the track, or if you want to stagger, some mastering engineers like that, you could just kind of do it like that. Or again, so right click, insert audio files, browse, you'll see listed recent files, and then you can just add them in. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Nick or Tim. Okay. All right, we see Soren has lots of rain in Sweden. Where he's at? Västerås. Sure I'm saying that wrong. All right. All right, so we see from Tiago, it says warp question. I do select the event, but I don't use quantize. Sometimes waveforms stick in desired place. Other times they don't. Okay, so let's say I stop my warp. If you have a project that you could share with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it. It says I do select event, but I don't use quantize. Sometimes waveforms stick in desired place. So let's see if the track is not in musical mode. If we still, yeah, even if it's not in musical mode, it still allows you to warp. Maybe if other people have run into this, if they could kind of chime in and see if they get that, but it seems like everything is kind of behaving as expected as long as we have kind of our anchors there. But if you have a project that you notice it kind of acting up on you, Tiago, if you want to share that with me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. All right, we have from Anurag Sharma. It says, hi, is it possible in Cubase 13 Pro with Groove Agent SE that we add drum pads to my MIDI keyboard pads and piano VST play simultaneously and with individual playing access as we do in an arranger keyboard? It says I have Novation Mark IV. So, you know, as long as often if you wanted to kind of play back in, let's say if I have drum pads here on my controller keyboard. So, generally it's going to be if they're broken down by different MIDI ports, you could do that. Or often if you're set up for different MIDI channels, we could do that. So let's take a look. Say, okay, I want to add, I want to play the drums. I guess we want to play the drum pads from, let me just reread it, make sure. Drum pads. So drum pads from my MIDI keyboard and piano VST play simultaneously. So, if we want to come over here, we could say, let's add an instrument track. So let's say, okay, I want my howling and sonic here. We will just load up quick etude. All right, so we have. Now I think when I go to hit my drum pads, they're transmitting on the same MIDI channel. So now I'm hitting drum pads on my controller. And so if I want to come over here, let's add a groove agent. So if we could say, let's get to our instrument track, we'll add a groove agent SE. All right. All right, so when I come over here, if your controller can separate the, so when I come over here now, like, because these are both on MIDI channel 1, when I hit my drum pads, I'm playing both the piano and the drum sounds. And if I play the keyboard, so I'm not sure if my controller, and it's kind of tucked under like a bit of a shelf, but as long as you could split your controller to transmit those onto different MIDI channels, then you could route the different MIDI channels so that the drum pads only play the drums and the keyboard will only play the piano. So if you're Novation, I think you mentioned that you had the Novation controller, the Mark IV. So if the drum pads can be on like MIDI channel 2 and the piano on channel 1, then what you could do is, like, when you come here to your input channel, you could say, okay, the drum pads, which are on channel 2, are only going to this particular instrument, and then the keyboard can go to this instrument. But it's really kind of, if you want to split it up like that, it's going to be like a function of the MIDI controller being able to kind of separate MIDI channels for different parts of the controller. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question in general. Okay, let me just. So you see Tim Weinheimer saying, yes, thanks, Greg, perfect. So with the Wavelab questions. All right, Secret Studios asks, thank you, this is helping me so much. One last quick question. Is it possible to create folders for all of the track presets? So generally the track presets are always going to be in one particular folder, and that allows you to migrate and save all of your track presets with a, like when we do the profile manager to like migrate all of your Cubase or Nuendo settings with the profile manager, and Cubase always knows where to look for particular presets. And I personally found that, like, I don't necessarily need to have them kind of, organized in a folder, because when we're accessing, I'll come over here and say, okay, I want user presets for, everything will kind of be broken down here. So say, okay, I want user presets for my VST instruments. And then I could choose here, I could actually say, okay, but I want to come over, let's say with media, and I want to search by plugin name. I think we could do that. Let's see if it's in media here. Let's see if it's program name. So I think if we okay, so we'll just choose plugin name. So now I can say, okay, like I'm looking for track presets that are done for Pad Shop. I'm looking for track presets that were done for Halion 7. I'm looking for track presets, so we can just kind of come over and really, instead of having to, having to manually put everything into a folder, I could just kind of come over here. I could just say, okay, I want to find secret. And, we could just kind of search for, let's say I want to find a track preset for cello, whatever we want. So as soon as we, kind of come over here using kind of the databasing functionality, so you say, okay, I just want to find my user presets for VST instruments, and then, we could choose to, clear all of our filters, and, we could just come over here and say, I'm looking for these, 4 particular instruments as well. So this way we could just kind of very easily search. So I find that often we don't really, if everything's in one collective entity, when we go to another computer, we don't have to worry about kind of recreating that folder structure. Everything is saved into a common folder that can be easily migrated, but you could kind of just filter the search here for your different elements. So just come over and say, okay, you're looking for, again, user presets, track presets, VST instruments. I'm looking for all my ones in Halion Sonic, and there's the one we made right there. So if you kind of, do the search a little more intelligently, I find that you don't necessarily have to, for like track presets, have to have them kind of broken down into other folders. Let me know if that makes sense for you, Jay. All right, so we see Lee Pendleton asks, hi Greg, I'm new to Cubase. Well, welcome to the live stream. We hope to see you on many more. Can you explain how to see recorded automation when changing parameters inside a VST plugin? Okay, so let's say we'll just load up quick. Okay, so let's say we come here. All right, so I'm going to come over and I'll just record some. If I hit record, that would be helpful. All right. All right, so I'll just record something here quickly. All right, so we have that. Now let's say I want to record parameters. All right, so let's say I just come here. So I'm going to automate parameters, and we'll start with my mouse. All right, so now we've automated those parameters. So if you just kind of click here underneath, what you could actually do is you could just come over here and say, oh, here's the cutoff, and we could add different automation lanes so that we could automate different parameters kind of all at once. So we could just come over here, and then there's all of our automation. Now if you hit the F6 button, and you have the function buttons routed for Cubase, or you could open up the automation panel here. You could also just click on from the automation panel, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut for this, or you could say, okay, show used, and that will open up all of the automation. And we could say, I only want to see used only, so let's, boom. And then you could open up the different automation lanes so that you can edit multiple lanes of automation simultaneously. But for the most part, if you just kind of hover to the bottom left of the track, you could open up your automation lanes, and where if you don't see, so let's say this is set to volume, and we close, you'll come over here where you see like an asterisk that would indicate. So let's say if I close, let me just close all of my automation here. All right, so now if I automate volume and panning, when we go to open up our automation lanes, usually the first one would be volume, but where you see like this little asterisk to the right of the parameter, that would indicate that that particular parameter has automation available that has been written into the track. So kind of just click on the lower left hand corner, and then you could see all the written automation and that's where you can edit it. So let me know if that's helpful, and thanks again for joining us on the live stream. All right. All right, so we see from Tiago, it says, and warp markers stay in the correct position to waveforms, but not relative to the project or other events or tracks. And it says, I'll send it to you. Yeah, so yeah, please send it along. I'll take a look at the project. Sometimes I've seen people run into scenarios like that where the timeline has switched from bars and beats to like seconds, and then the grid is kind of misaligned for their edits, while in seconds or time versus bars and beats as well. So check that just on the off chance. All right, so we have from Anurag Sharma, says, another question. Whenever I connect my electric guitar directly into Cubase 13, it seems very low volume. And if I normalize audio, it starts distorting. Can you please guide how to solve this? So a lot of times if it's low volume, if you plug a guitar directly into like a mic preamp or to line level, the output of the guitar is often going to be at a different impedance. So you may have like an impedance mismatch, meaning that the input jack is not looking for kind of the correct level. So a lot of audio interfaces, like the interface that I'm using on the live stream now is the Steinberg UR242, will have a button that says high Z. And that's a switch that will switch the impedance of that particular input where guitar or bass is connected directly to, so that it's optimized for the correct impedance or kind of the correct levels coming from the instrument itself. So if your audio interface has a high Z switch, to switch it to like high impedance, that is probably what you would need to do to get the guitar. And if your interface doesn't have that, many people would get a direct box, connect into the direct box, and that way that would convert your high impedance line directly to like your high impedance signal into a line level signal that can be connected directly to your audio interface. Carlo asks, when will Cubase 15 come out? When it's done. So we usually don't announce release dates in advance, as kind of a general rule of thumb for Steinberg. So I can assure you that people are hard at work on Cubase 15, probably elements of Cubase 16, and probably parts of Cubase 17 as we speak. So when there was a new version, everyone's like, we got the new version out. And then like, a week or two later, it's like, okay, let's start working on the next version. So it's a very dedicated development team. So all right. All right, so we see I see from Val, it says, can we have an adjustable, just pure oscillator, or is there one? So I guess, if you want an oscillator, like a pure oscillator, so I'm not sure if it's for like an instrument or for synth, or for like, for test tones. But if we come over, let's say to our inserts here, when we go to tools, if we go to the test generator, this is an oscillator. So a lot of people refer to this as an oscillator that we could switch the, so if you wanted to have, so if you wanted it to be sine wave, triangle, sawtooth, square, sweeps. Now, if it's in regards to an instrument, if you have Retrologue is kind of a good example of this. So if we want to come here, all right, so let's say we start off with, so that's just, I'm not sure if you would call that a pure oscillator, but it's an oscillator. It's not being filtered. So we could say, okay, so you could switch between your different oscillator types, just like we did on our test tone generator. At this point, we could also choose to, do like a multi-oscillator to make it sound a little thicker. And if we want to combine this with other oscillators, so let's say, okay, I want this. Then we could adjust, kind of the level. We could adjust the shape. We could so if we want to now blend in your noise filter, and let's put in the sub oscillator. So, we could have 3 oscillators here, but there's kind of multi oscillator functions as well. And be able to kind of do your own So let me know kind of in what context, Val, that you mean by pure oscillator. So I think you get pretty pure with the test zone generator or just using Retrologue. All right, wonderful. See Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. All right. All right. So we see from, let's just see a comment from. All right, we see from Gareth says, I guess it's ROTW, maybe revelation of the week is pattern editor using the sample creator thing. All right, so Anurag Sharma says, yes, you got the question right. It's just, it has channel 1 for keys and channel 10 for pads, but I'm not able to change CC command on Groove Agent SE drum pad, custom rhythm. So if you, all right, so let's take a look. So if you want to come over, let's say where we have Groove Agent, let's open up the Groove Agent interface. All right, so let's say if we have patterns here and we want to maybe have different, or different keys switch between the patterns. So I think if we come over here, so let's see if these are, so you could probably, one way is just to change the note assignments that are being transmitted on the Novation controller. And let's see if we come here. And if you right click, you could edit, learn. So I'm going to come over here. So now, just you could right click on the particular note on the pattern pad, and I could just say, let's trigger that particular. So I'll just come here. So I want to edit, rename the trigger note. And I can say, okay, I want this to be pattern 2, right click on the pad and assign that. So now when I come over here, I could just hit these particular keys. Then I could trigger the patterns. So you could, assign them just by going to right clicking on the pattern pads here and assigning the particular notes. So again, so now as we kind of play this, this way I could just kind of trigger these particular patterns. So if I just put this into, now I could just trigger the different patterns right there from MIDI. So try just to right click and edit learn trigger note, and then I think you should be able to just, have those particular pads trigger the patterns that you want. So give that a try. And there's also, if you run into scenarios, you could also click on where we see this, where you can have a separate pattern port, a separate MIDI port for patterns as well. So you may see this under the bottom left-hand corner. But then you can just simply, as soon as we come right over there, that way if you had that pattern that was also triggering a drum sound, you could have a separate MIDI port right here just by activating this little MIDI icon. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have John Koutsalinas sending greetings from the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, so see Garrett says just completed prepping the rest of side B, book 2 to pester you with. So I have 2 songs that are just about done, but I think I may re-record one and put new bass strings on. But if you have any drum parts, that'd be great. All right, so Garrett's saying the Steinberg pattern editor drum thing will appear in the next Hot Mess. All right, DJ Mixes says, what are the news in Cubase 15? So I guess when it's released, we will do a live stream. The next time that we do the live stream after a new release, we generally always do kind of an extended walkthrough of that. So we don't, Steinberg tends not to share information ahead of time with releases. Just kind of then our competitors will start to do stuff and change their course. We've seen it many times. So we see from Secret Studios, Jay says, that helps tremendously. It certainly helps me streamline my strategy workflow. So if I create folders within the MediaBay for my preferred orchestral libraries, could be even faster. You know, you could actually rate them if you wanted to. So you could say, you know, my preferred orchestral libraries, those instruments have 4 stars versus the default 3 stars. And, you know, this is always the one I'm going to use. This is like a 5-star rating. So you could have different rating systems so that you could navigate very easily within MediaBay without having to kind of spend tons of time organizing folders and forgetting where different folders were. All right, let me read through comments. All right. Okay, just see. We see that Rick from Bratman Studios gotten COVID, so sorry to hear about that. Yeah, someone I work with got COVID this week, was out as well. Sorry to hear it. We hope it's a mild case and you recover quickly. All right, Domini asks, when I duplicate events MIDI after modifying their names, did duplicated ones come with the previous names, not the new ones as it was with the previous version of Cubase? How to fix that? Okay, so let's give it a shot. So let's say I have this event here. All right, so let's say I've changed the name here, so we'll call it Domini. Okay, so now when I come over here, let's go ahead and I'll duplicate the event. All right. So let's see if it might be with a preference. So let's go check a preference or settings depending on your operating system. I think that there's a setting, it might be under like tracks, get part names. So I'm going to try turning this preference off here under editing, parts get track names. So I changed the name of this particular part, but the track is still called Groove Agent SE. And now if I duplicate, yeah, now it's that particular name. So go to your preferences or settings under editing, and then you could just uncheck parts get track names. Then when we duplicate, it's not going to assume the track name. It will use the name of the event. All right, so we have from vterm, what is the fastest way in Cubase to align, say, 3 samples with each other in phase? Okay. Probably the audio alignment. All right, so I'll come here. So let's say we have files here that are all right, so we look at this and all right, so I'm going to come here and you see this little icon here, which is the phase, the alignment panel. So I'm going to select this one as my source. I'm going to take the other files here and we'll make those our targets. We could choose to favor words, or we could prefer time shifting, and then just say align audio. And now when we listen to it, so that's probably the fastest way I would think of. So, you know, take your one file that you want as kind of the reference, click to add that as a reference, select the other ones and make that into your targets. And then you could adjust the percentage, you could choose match of words, you could kind of play around with those in the alignment precision, and then you could align all of your audio in phase like that. All right. Tim K just says Retrologue is mind-boggling and mind-bending in all kinds of wonderful ways. All right, great to see you, Flyvy, checking in from Winnipeg, from his parents' house. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Anurag Sharma says, I used a Line 6 Pod Go as interface for guitar, but the clean amp volume is around minus 24 dB only. So, you know, check the gain structure of the Line 6. So I'm not sure if you're connecting the Line 6 output directly to so the Pod Go. So you might have to just kind of increase the gain. Another thing that you could do if you can't get more gain out of the Line 6 is like when you go into your mix console, you'll see that, you know, if you come over here, like if you have you'll have input channels as part of Cubase, and you could increase the gain of the input channels. So generally this is what the channels that are in red to the left, and you could increase or decrease the gain of those particular channels just by, you could do that, but you might just have to kind of get more gain out of the instruments. I'm not sure if your line 6 is going directly into an audio interface or if it's going directly into the computer that way. So if you could, I know the pod goes, like the little tiny one, I think I have one. But you'd still, so let me know if you're using a pod go, if you're using that as like a USB audio interface or if it's going into another interface, and then you may have to adjust that to be line level. And also, like if you're going from like the type of cable may matter too. So if you're going like an 1/8 inch mini jack into a mic pre, that may not work as well. So if you give some more information, but you can probably always get more gain out of the line 6. So. All right, so we see pre joining. Great to see you on. All right, so we have FlyV who asks, says, what does having groups and sends in the audio connections menu do? So a lot of times we have people that may always want to have, so let's say if you don't work with templates. So some people work with templates so that every sound could be loaded, everything could be, I need to record percussion, I turn this track on and everything's routed. I need to record bass. I need to record my synthesizer. Everything's patched in, ready to go. And some people won't work with templates because they're not using kind of the same tools all the time. So when we go to your audio connections, if we don't want to necessarily use a template, but we know that we're going to have a drum group, a vocal group, a guitars group, a keyboard group, we could have the groups and the effects. I'm always going to use this reverb as my go-to starting off reverb. I'm always going to, like when I start off a project, I always want this delay that's accessible. So if we don't have a template, but we still want to have our groups and effects that are available so that we're not bound to a template. So, having a template can make you work faster, but sometimes it's also easy with a template to keep using the same sounds because you know where they are, and probably many of us are guilty of that, where it's like, okay, this is what I do for bass every time, and then, but maybe when you work with a new client or you're working on a new song, maybe you want to try something different and fresh. So if you choose not to work with a template, but you still want to have, that you're always going to be using different groups for parallel processing, then you could have those set up in the audio connections, so it will always be available in different projects if you want. All right. All right, Contemplate Music just says, hello, Greg and team. Greetings from Derby in the UK. My question is more the vast instruments related. Did the development team consider to add a visual representation of changes made to Retrologue 3? So I'm not sure if you want to see... so we have Retrologue 2 as a current version, so I'm not sure if it's like a wish list item, but a lot of times when we come over, because it's often used inside of Cubase. So let's say if we add a Retrologue here, and let's open up an oscilloscope inside of, so I'll just, so if you want to see like a visual representation, so let's say, if you just go to SuperVision and let's switch this to an oscilloscope. So if we want to, be able to make adjustments. Here, let me just. We can see just kind of using like a software oscilloscope, and we could adjust kind of the. So now, okay, I want it to be, we could change. So let's come over here. Let's, what does it look like if we put a multi-oscillator on? Okay, let's put a filter. So a lot of things that we could actually, so if you want to see more like a visual representation. So as we make a change here in Retrologue, just having an oscillator or, plug in. And, we get a pretty good idea what's going on sonically with the plugin. So let's say. Okay, so now we want to release up. But, you could definitely kind of teach a synthesis class, just kind of doing that. And let's combine a second oscillator, and we can see how those two oscillators interact with each other. And we can throw in a sub. So say we add more of the sub oscillator in, more noise. So let me know if it's that type of visual that you're kind of asking about, the visual representation. So I think a lot of times you're like, oh, we have the oscillator inside of Cubase that you could use already. So let me know if that makes sense, or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, Doug McDaniel asks, is there a way to change the amplitude waveforms of an entire audio track all at once rather than selecting sections and doing them one by one? Yeah, so let me just jump back to a different project here. All right, so let's say we have a number of different files here. All right, so I have a bunch of little snippets of audio here. So if I just, let's say I hold down Shift and double click, we can select kind of all of the events. Let me just revert this quickly. Okay, so all right, so I want to take all of these files here. So Shift, double click, or I'll just say select all events on a particular track. And now, so all of these events are selected. I can adjust kind of my clip gains for all of the events simultaneously. So, and even if we have events on different tracks, so let's say, okay, move these events here. So if I just have all the events selected, I could adjust the clip gain on multiple tracks. So you don't have to do it one by one, just select them all, and all their volumes can be adjusted. All right, the question is from K0 Beats. I need Cubase 14 for 2 PCs. Can I download it twice with one Steinberg account? You could run it on 3 different computers. So once you install it on your second computer, just simply go to your Steinberg Activation Manager, and then you can activate that particular license. And at that point, you'll be all set to go. So you could run it again on up to 3 different computers with a single Cubase license. Sorry, just got a quick message came in I have to respond to. All right. Okay, so we see from Vincent Maldonado says, "Hey guys, does Addictive Drums integrate with Groove Agent at all?" So it's basically, a very similar program to Groove Agent. So there's no real integration that I know of. I haven't run Addictive Drums in maybe a decade or so. But I think it's its own standalone thing. You could probably, I know that you could take Groove Agent files and have Groove Agent play different sounds, like if we wanted a particular Groove Agent style. So let's say I have, a drum kit here, and let's say I like this particular pattern, but I didn't like this sounds. Like I wanted to play back different sounds in a different instrument. So I will come over here. Let's just load up a drum set inside of Hallian Sonic, and this could be Addictive Drums, but just any other instrument. So let me just look for... All right, so now I have a hip hop kit here. So I have, now we take a look at this, I have Groove Agent that's playing here. So if I wanted to take the sounds from that pattern and play it back, what I could do now is I'll mute this instance. I'm going to let that pattern play. I'm going to go to this instrument, and again, we'll go to its MIDI input and say we want it coming from Groove Agent. So now Groove Agent is playing the pattern, but the sound is coming from Hallian Sonic. So now you take, and if we wanted to layer those two together, we could just come over here and just have a hybrid drum set. So in that case, you could have like the patterns from Groove Agent play, but for the most part, it's, Groove Agent's not going to load up an Addictive Drums kit, and Addictive Drums I don't think is going to load up a Groove Agent kit. Okay. So we see from Flyvy, what does the master bus with automation take care of? So often if we have a song, and let's say we want to do like master bus automation, it could be utilized for, like, let's say I want to take this particular song, right? All right, so generally you have like kind of an input output. So, and I see my master fader here, but let's say I just want to do like a fade in or a fade out to start the song. So I could just come over here and we'll say, okay, I want this to fade in for 2 measures. So I could just say, okay, let's take this point, and now we can if we look at our master fader here, in the red here on the right, I'll just make that a little larger. So we go back to the beginning of the project, we'll see that master fader is now automated. And if you wanted to automate EQ changes, you could do that as well. So you're going to come here. So if we want to come here, so if you need to automate EQ changes to bring out a certain part, or so those are like typical things. If you want to do a fade out on a song, it's also kind of very typical to make sure, you know, like people used to get paid a lot of money to have very smooth linear fade outs in a particular song, and now it's, you know, like I used to take a lot of pride in my fade outs in songs when I was kind of an engineer. But now you could just kind of come over here and just say, okay, I want to take, you know, this point and say, okay, now we just, you know, we could just do your straight kind of linear fade out here, and, you know, just a matter of seconds to say, okay, now we have a perfect fade out, you know, so as we do this. So that's often when you'd use kind of automation on a master bus. So fade ins, fade outs, and, you know, it's the most predominant. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so see Gareth's note about Pablo's drums might be coming a little bit later. See Gareth giving kudos to Bruce Campbell. So new Hot Mess release coming out on next Friday. We will have it on release day for the next Club Cubase Zoom social meetup. So all right, so we see Audi and Lee just says, hi Greg, when we record an acoustic guitar with 2 microphones in MS stereo, we use one track for the mid signal mic and cardioid pattern, the other for the side signal figure 8 pattern. After recording, we copy the side signal track and flip the phase on it, and then we link the 2 sidetracks and pan it hard left and hard right. Is there an easier way to do that? All right, so let's say we might be able to do a macro for it. Let's see. I don't have an audio example, but we'll just see if we can. I think we might be able to do something to kind of automate the process a little bit. All right, so let's say that we want to duplicate the channel, flip the phase, and pan this hard left, hard right. Pan one hard left, hard right. All right, so let's make a logical editor preset, a project logical editor preset. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so we're going to take the track and okay, so we're going to take so we're going to transform and say we want that track, and we'll get to track operation, and we'll say connect output, and I'll just say to the left. Okay. We'll save this as a preset. And let's save another preset. We're going to route it to the right. All right, let me just... Okay, so we're going to take make sure I did the first one right here. And we're going to make this our selected channel. We're going to update this. Property we'll say is set to is selected. So when you switch, I'll just build in. So we'll transform, and we'll say Okay, so we're going to take this particular track. We want to, let's say, set this to the left channel. Let's see if we can do this, and I think we could do it in a macro. Okay, so let's come over here to key commands. All right. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we'll send this to the left. So I'm going to go to my we're going to route this to the left channel. Add that command. Let's duplicate the track. Add that command. We will now invert phase. Let's add that command, and let's come over to route that track out to the right, add that command. All right, so we see this is going to our stereo out. We need to go down after we duplicate the track, or let's see if we need to. All right, I just want to, didn't do the, let me just check the phase on these two tracks. Okay, so we did the phase, it didn't do the output routing, so let me just, going to duplicate this. All right, I'm just going to all right, so let me see what is, if I have some, oh, I have this set to folder track instead of track. All right, so we have this is going to our stereo out now. So let's see if we run this macro, I'll call it MS guitar. We want to make sure, going to pan it hard left, hard right. We need to copy this, copy the track, flip the phase on it. So let's see, cross my fingers, come over here. All right, this is still, but you could, let me just see if there's, all right, let me just check my I think we got everything except for that first routing. So we'll come here. All right, let me see if I can just... Okay, let me just try. Remove that one command. All right, reopen Cubase. I think we're close to it. Just change one part of the macro, and I think we got it. Okay, so let's take this. Okay. All right, so let's go to the macro one more time. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's build it quickly, so we'll call it MS Guitar. All right, so let me try this again. So right now this is going to our stereo out. And we'll run the macro. Okay, let me change this to duplicate tracks. Sorry. Instead of duplicate. Okay, so we'll start with this stereo out. Now, all right, so this is now the left channel. This is going to the right channel. We've duplicated. Let's check for our phase. And we can see that our, all right, let me just try the phase one more time. Okay, so stereo out. Let's run the macro. had the phase working before. Let me just try. Let me invert the phase first on the first track. Okay, so stereo out. That should be on the second one. Let me. All right, try that order, because I knew we had it right before we had to crash. Try one more time. I know we had the phase part, right? One last time, but I may play with this some more over the weekend, see if I get this completely dialed in for you. But I'll try one more time since we got this far. All right, let's try selecting the events and then okay. There we go. All right. So we just had to have the event selected. So if you come over here, so you wanted to set up the logical editor to route it to the left channel and to the right channel. Duplicate the tracks. So that will duplicate track, and then we want to set this to the right channel output. And then we're going to select the events on the track and then invert the phase. So that way everything will be, as we look at it here, we can see that the phase is now inverted. We just had to select that particular event. So give that a try and let me know if that kind of speeds up your workflow. If you don't need to do if the panning to do okay manually is okay, then you could just do that manually and not worry about the project logical editor. But if you want to see the project logical editor again, for reference, so we just it's basically just take this selected track, and that's in case you have tons of other tracks, and then route that out. The track operation connect to output left or right. So once again, just kind of starting from scratch, we'll come right over here, or stereo out, and then that could do that process for you and speed up your workflow. Sorry, it took a while to get there. All right. All right. See, Gareth is going to feed his daughter Lola. All right, Domini asks, says, is it possible to disable manually unwanted VSTs, especially VST2s? So if you don't want them showing up like in your system, so if you don't want VST2s in general, if you go to the studio menu, to your VST plugin manager, you could just have Cubase not access the VST2 plugins. And then once you have it kind of in your list here, like if you don't want a particular plugin, I think that you could, like if we go to the information here, that you could just disable, you could hide the particular plugins from showing up. So you may have to just click on the little info, and then you do have the ability to hide plugins so that they don't show up. Okay. Okay, so we see from Contemplate Music, says, hello Greg, I didn't make myself clear, apologies. I mean in the future to have visual representation and changes made to the sound like Serum has, for example. So I don't have a Serum license, but I mean, I think doing that you can see the changes in the sound. I mean, was the sound that we were seeing, but so if you wanted to do that, and you know, there's some capabilities like in Halligan for doing sound design stuff for that. All right, and Contemplate Music says wishlist for 3.0. All right, so we see from Domini, is it possible to load Drum Machine on an existing MIDI track, please? How to use it as an instrument VST? So there's no way to turn a MIDI event into a pattern event, but when we start our particular project, you know, what you could do is just say, okay, I want to come over here to, let's load up, I wanted to use it with Groove Agent SE, let's say. All right, and then when I load the particular instrument track here, I'm going to choose, instead of that going to a MIDI part, just to a pattern event. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and load up a quick kit here. All right, so say, all right, so I'm going to, on this pattern here, I'm going to just create the drum map from the instrument. And now when we go to our editor, we can now see our different. So now I'm going to access and play the sounds. Now you may have to manually add additional sounds here, and you'll see that that will automatically populate. So as soon as I want to come over here, like as we hit play, I could just say, okay, let's. And make sure I don't have it. So now I'm using just a normal kind of VST. So I can say, okay. So, but now all these sounds are just coming straight from. So all these sounds are coming straight from Groove Agent. So you could use it with any VST instrument for the pattern editor. So just simply when you go to add the instrument track, come here, choose for it to be a pattern event, and then if you have the drum machine sounds, load up the drum map for it, and then it's automatically going. You click on the plus sign and you can populate more sounds just like that. Or if we want to randomize and all these sounds again are coming from Groove Agent. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so FlyV's question is, what does the icons do in group called group editing and audio warp? Okay, so I'll show you. Here's get to our venerable Amos Moses project here. All right, so now that we have stuff in a folder, so I have all my drums in a folder. I could move all of my different parts independently here within a folder. But if I put group editing on, now when I move an element within the group, all of the sounds will automatically be grouped together. So that's what the group icon does. So if we wanted to do quantizing of our drums, like we showed on the last live stream, we would group all the different sounds together. Now, when we have this little icon on a group folder is for the phase coherent audio warping. So what we could do now is if we have let's say we're in free warp mode here, and let's say I place warp markers. So I'll just switch over here. So we say, okay, these are where our hits are. So we could now at this point just come over and say, okay, let's take. So when we have the phase coherent warping on, now when I move one of them, we'll do kind of multi-channel warping. So this way, if I want to warp all the drums together, I could just do it on one track. When that is disabled, we do our warping. We could do our warping on a single track. So if I just kind of come here, we could warp on a single track, but if we wanted to be kind of phase coherent, that is when we would, enable kind of for the warping and maintain the phase relationship between all the channels in a group. All right. So we see from Doug McDaniels, it's cool. All right, so we see from Doug McDaniel, says, I've converted a vocal track to a MIDI track, and now I've created a score from that. However, the vocal scores are usually shown with a treble clef, but musically it's showing currently mostly on the F clef. How can I show it on a treble clef? So it usually kind of depends on the name of the particular instrument, but let's say if I wanted to do it, just find something with a vocal, because if I do a bass here, it would automatically just kind of drop it into. All right. All right, so I want to do quick. So we'll do our VaryAudio edits here. Do our analysis. All right, and I'm going to go to my functions. We'll extract the MIDI. We'll make a new MIDI track. So often what could be critical is kind of like the name. So let's say you want to just call this vocal. So now when I go into the score editor, let's see what clef it gives me. So now we could see that it's automatically kind of changed that. But if you didn't change the name, so it's not necessarily the event name or the track name. We should just mention that it could often be the part name. Now, let's say if you got the wrong clef here in the score editor, what you could do is if you go to the score menu, you could just go to instrument settings, and then you'll see track name. You could give it a vocal, and here we could choose like which type of, so let's say so here it's kind of done vocal. So but if let's say I want to change the instrument type, so here what you could do is just go to singers and go to lead. So if I change this to, let's say, a bass guitar or a string, let's say to a tuba part here, so we'll come over, and now this will convert that into bass clef because the instrument type is being seen as tuba. So again, just kind of come over here and you'll see instrument type. You could just say we want it to be, for voice, and we want it to then, so we say singers, lead singer, and then that will automatically assign the appropriate clef for the extracted MIDI information. So kind of the name of the event can have a great impact on that. Okay, so we see our next question from Tony Trunzo. Just all right, let me just have my chat field jumped. All right, so we see Tony Trunzo asks, Greg, when I unmix a song in Spectral Layers, is there an easy way to identify the guitar parts from the other layers so I could transfer to the guitar layer? So let's see if I have, let's see if I have an unmix example here. Let me just. Okay. All right, so come here. Let me make sure I don't kill everyone volume-wise. All right, so all right, so I'm here, and we have kind of our unmixed. All right, so all right, so let's say, like here, I don't really have much else hanging up, but let's say if I wanted to take like this particular area, I think that we could. I haven't done this yet myself, but let's see. I think that we could now like take this and put it into an existing layer. I'm trying to remember how to do that. See if we. I know it's kind of one of the new things in Spectral Layers 12. I don't have. Let's see if I could just take maybe part of the bass layer here. Let's say. Let's see if it's in the layer menu, but okay, so if we just kind of come over here, and just let me reread the question, make sure. It's an easy way to identify the guitar parts from another layer. So, I mean, you have to kind of sonically listen to it, but then I think when we come here, we could say cut to, and then you could cut it to the other layer. But you might have to listen to like the particular parts here. Like I don't have a lot of guitar that's kind of leaking over here. But once we have, if you see that something is like, oh, that's definitely a guitar part, just right click and cut to, then you can add it to the layer. But I think that there's probably not an automatic way to say, oh, because if it thought it was a guitar part, then it would put it into the guitar layer for you. So. All right, so we see from Val says about the master bus automation. I know Austin from Make Pop Music does this in his Cubase templates to do exactly what Greg showed, but you can like automate everything, like more gain on hooks, etc. So yeah, or make a solo part wider, or high cut, low cut automation on EDM tracks. All right, so we see from FlyV says, thanks Greg, great being here learning. All right, Contemplate Music says, how can we join the Zoom meeting? Is it limited to some only, or anybody can join? Anybody that's in the live, generally we don't open it up to everyone. We open up to people that are in the live stream. So next Friday when we have the Zoom meetup, we'll have like a 2-hour live stream, and then after that we will do like the next 2 or 3, sometimes 3.5, 4 hours. We've had some really great discussions. But we'll do that. We'll just simply, I'll post a link. I don't necessarily post it publicly, it's just anyone that's in the live stream. We try to kind of keep it to people that are in the live stream to kind of keep them, manage it a little better. But we will post the link and anyone can join on next Friday. So it'll be 1 week from today. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on, and her question is there a way to import a PDF or melody line sheet music and convert it to MIDI? So there are some tools, a lot of notation programs were doing this like 10 to 15 years ago, and it ended up being very problematic. I think by time most people fixed all the errors, it seems something kind of so simple, but we all know that, extracting musical meaning from a graphic image is often open for interpretation. If you put the same piece of music in front of 5 musicians would probably each play it a bit differently. So there aren't any built-in tools. I know like Sibelius and Finale were like including that with their particular programs, and I think both of them dropped support because it was problematic and probably the customer expectations exceeded the abilities to do it. I think that there are some tools that you could get for your phone where you could use your phone as a scanner and then save that as a music XML file in the app, and then you could just come over here and import the music XML file directly into Cubase. So nothing that's included with Cubase, but I've heard many people kind of using their camera on an app and scanning that way and using an app to convert it into music XML. All right. All right, Steven asks, hi Greg, can you show a quick logical editor filters to set just a hi-hat foot pedal to certain velocity range? Okay, so let me just close this out. Okay, so let's say it could really be on any particular note. So let me just. Okay. All right, so let's say we just want to put in some quick hi-hats here. Okay. Let's take it off step here real quick. All right, so let's say all right, so say our velocities are varying here. So some very soft, some very loud. So let's say we want the, so you're going to set the foot pedal to a certain velocity range. Okay, so let's say, okay, so let's go to our logical editor. Let's come here to setup. All right, so we could say, okay, we want to transform notes, and we could, if we want it to be only for, let's say, notes that are F#1, we could say we want to do our subtype is, and we'll say equal to F#1. Okay, and then now what we want to do is we want to transform the velocity. So we're going to say we want every note that's F#1 or G#1, whatever pitch. And if it's on a separate track, you don't have to specify the pitch. And we want to say, okay, we're going to take the velocity, and we could say, like if we want it to be set to a fixed value, we could say, okay, make every note fixed to 100. So we could do that, or if we want it to be, we could say set to, within a range. So we could say, okay, I want to set random values between 60 and 110. So now when we look at, we can now just completely randomize. Let me just make sure we have this selected. So now we could just set the particular range, or if you don't want it to be random values, you'd say, so you could say relative change within the loop range. So, but if you could just come over here, so you want to set the pitch, and then you can say, okay, I want the velocity values between 60 and 110. So you could set kind of your range there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see Gareth has fed his daughter, so that's good. Now you have to tell us what you fed her for dinner. So, right, so Tim K just says, I want to root for Greg to solve the macro in real time, but I just confused the live stream by the time Greg gets to it. So I remember the macro. So, all right. All right, Dead Automatic asks, how do you unlink an audio clip? I'd like to copy an audio clip and do some sort of baking in the effects on just the copied clip, but it always does this on both the original and the copy. It's because it's kind of the same file, but let's show you what we could do here. All right, so there is a preference for this. So let's come over. All right, so I have this particular audio file here. So let's say I want to duplicate this clip, and when I come to do an audio process such as a reverse, or let me just, so let's say I'll do a fade in here. So let's go to a process, and I want to do a fade in. So we see that, oh, now this one works independently, so there is a preference. So let's go to your preferences or settings, and you want to go to editing to audio, and it'll be on processing shared clips. So here we could say, process existing clip, just choose create new version. So what happens a lot of times is when we do this, the default behavior is when we go to audio and I do a fade in, that you get this little message and you're like, oh, I never want to see you again. That's an annoying message. So if you choose to come over here, so you can say, oh, make a new version of it, then it won't affect the other copies. But if you just if you always kind of expect that behavior, come over to editing to audio on processing shared clips, just choose to create new version automatically. And then if I do, even though these are the same audio files, if I do a fade in on this file or adjust the gain, whatever process I want. So if I come here, okay, I want to adjust the gain on this, it's only going to process that one clip and not the other shared clips. So just adjust that preference, and then it'll do what you want. Okay. All right, so we see at 313, I have to catch up. We have 74 likes. It's great. All right, we see Gerald Ely just says, yeah, we see Uno Momento says, reminds us when ABBA won in 1974 the European Song Contest with Waterloo. And then see Gerald Ely had it as a crossword puzzle, as a song clue. All right, so we see Lee Pendleton says, Greg, can you explain how the racks work and what they would be used for? So like the rack, maybe it's the rack instruments. All right, so let's say kind of in the old days of DAWs, we tried to follow like the concept, the paradigm of, because how people were doing a lot of MIDI work is you would have MIDI instruments that, hardware-based instruments, and you would send a MIDI track out to that. And a common form of instruments, and I have like a 6-foot tall rack of them, was like a rack mount tone module. So to kind of keep this paradigm alive, when we kind of started, we wanted that same paradigm for VST instruments. So if we go to our VST instruments, we have racks here. So now when I say, okay, I want to come over here and I want to play the grand, all right? So when we do this, and I have a preference that's enabled, that we load up the instrument rack, and then now when I come over here, it automatically adds a MIDI track, and this is like a default preference, but I've added a MIDI track, and this MIDI track is routed to the rack instrument. So if we come over here, we can just, okay, I just want to play. Okay, so this is an instrument rack just like the same exact concept and paradigm as a rack of tone modules. Now, to simplify things, and as we did this, and Steinberg was the first company that introduced software instruments, so as kind of the paradigm, became where people had never experienced hardware rack instruments, we kind of simplified the process. So when we do this, and we go to the mix console, we could have a separate MIDI track and a separate channel for the volume, the MIDI channel, and for the instrument. But if we want to consolidate those, now we could add an instrument track. So now when I want to add an instrument track, instead of having two faders for this, when I go to add, let's say, an instrument in the grand, and we'll just do a quick, like a CP80 sound. So now we have one track with all of the sounds, and this is consolidated. And when we do this, this shows up as an instrument track above and the instrument rack. Now, this is, most people, I think, tend to gravitate to using instrument tracks for convenience. But there's still 14 billion Cubase projects that have instrument tracks, and some people still prefer that for some reasons. But that's what the racks are. So it's kind of more following the paradigm and concepts of older workflows, integrating hardware with your MIDI sequencing environments. Okay, so we see Contemplate Music says, Greg, I recently moved to Mac Studio from PC. What are the specs of your machine that seems to fly? Okay, so I have a great performance. I have an i9 for my personal studio. For work, it's a G4 with 64 gigs of RAM. So I'm running an Apple M4 Max. And I think a lot of it is I don't have a ton of third-party stuff, so I just have Steinberg-only instruments on here. So but nothing special. It's just, when we get, they will lease laptops for employees at Yamaha Corporation of America. So, and because I deal with software, I try to get the biggest computer that I possibly can get. But it's just really, I didn't do any tweaks or anything with it. Just kind of runs great. And my i9 runs great and is super responsive and snappy as well. When I invested my own money, I bought an i9. So. All right, so we see from Leonardo Sants just says, "Hi Greg, could you please show us the best way to identify the BPM of a full EDM track? When I use tempo detection, it gives me a BPM, but it keeps changing. How can I get a reliable fixed BPM?" So, if we were to think about a tempo, like a song, even though it feels, let's say if we put a groove on a song. So let's come over. All right. So generally what the BPM is picking up is actually kind of more accurate. So we'll show you an example. So let's say we'll do kind of a groove agent pattern here. We'll do a super generic pattern. All right, let me just... All right, so I'll just load up a kit here quickly. All right, so let's say I'm here and I'm just going to put in all right, so we see that this is like perfectly on the grid, and I'm going to add some swing to it. All right, so I'm going to drag this pattern. All right, so we'll drag this. I'm going to convert it to MIDI. Okay, and let's just come over, and I'm going to render this particular track here. All right, let me just... So we're going to have one part. So we see that this is all at a perfect even tempo. But when we have a groove, what the groove is doing is it's actually moving the position of, when you are swinging and you have a groove, it's often moving those notes on every single beat slightly to the beginning and end. So when we listen to this with our click track, I'll go to my control room here. Let's activate click. All right, so that sounds like perfectly in time, sounds straight. But now when we do a project tempo detection, So we'll come over here to our tempo track. We'll see that it's actually detecting the groove of that particular track. So it's not perfectly steady because we put the swings on, and every single beat is kind of speeding up and slowing down. So if you're doing a lot of syncing loops to that, this is going to be a more accurate way to have the different loops. And if you're trying to kind of figure out, like, you know, what the exact tempo is, we can see that the tempo here is going to kind of fluctuate every beat. So depending on where the groove is, that's why. So sometimes you just kind of look at, you know, if you need it to be a perfectly steady beat for editing, and then realize that that's not going to be as accurate, which is why you have these, you know, these subtle variations. But kind of say, okay, this is, you know, if you see like 120.123, 119. You know, 214, you know, you could kind of guesstimate that it's probably, you know, someone was doing the tempo at 120 beats a minute. So when you do this, even though, you know, sounds like it's, you know, people go, oh, it's perfectly steady, it's all programmed. But when you put a groove into it, those grooves are in fact just subtle tempo variations that resolve with, you know, if we look at this, we'll probably see this same exact pattern over and over again. And this is, so we see 119.469, 119.469. So we can see these patterns just over and over again because that's how the beat, the groove is being actually determined. So when you're doing this, it's more accurate. So if you had other elements that were synced up to that, this would automatically do it. But just, you know, kind of look at it, and then, you know, you could try to just kind of come over and say, you know, guess, kind of like if I was looking at this, you know, oh, we go 125.301, 120.076, 119.924, 119.474, that I would probably say that this is 120 just looking at it. But why you have those tempo variations is because it's actually being more accurate. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so we see from David Blues asks, hi Greg, in Groove Agent 5, can we process the dynamics, compressor, clipper, reverb, etc. for each pad individually? So let's say we have our, let's go back to our Groove Agent pad here. So let's say we have our Groove Agent. So it would be, the routing would be slightly different depending which type of agent you're in. So let's say I'm here and I want to put a compressor on just the kick. Let me put this back into range here. Okay, so let's say we have, like, I want to take my reverb here, let's say my snare. So once I'm on the pad, if we come over, we could say, okay, let's go to the mixer. And here we could say, okay, I want for the agent, or we could say, okay, I want for the entire kit, for the mixer. So, you know, we could come over here and just say, all right, so let me just, great. So, you know, here we could, you know, just have your particular effects. So we can say, okay, I want this. So if we go to like our aux sends, we can say, okay, let's go to our reverb. So I want to add, let's say we have our reverb on here, an aux send 1. So if I want that on the snare, I could come right over here and just say, okay, we go to edit, and then we go to the amplifier section. We can see aux 1. And then we could, so let's go back to the mixer here and say, okay, let's go to our aux. Let's turn on the reverb. And then you could just do it just kind of like that. So we could have your different, so you can have the master section for the agent kit. So you can say, okay, I want, and then if we have this going, let's say to output 2, I could just say, okay, let's get to output 2 here. And I will just turn the solo off. So this is going to output 2, and we can say, okay, let's get to send 1. So we could have your different send effects for the different outputs, but when I come to edit this snare, I could send this snare to output 2, and then we could have it go through different effects. If it is a beat agent kit, what you do is just simply come over here, and I'll load a quick beat agent kit, or like an acoustic agent kit. And then here you have a more kind of traditional analog mixer. So if we're playing back, so if I go to, let's say, my instrument, I can say, okay, this is going out. So here I can see my snare is automatically kind of broken out. I can go to my aux ends and say, okay, we're going to have our reverb here. So when I go to my agent mixer, we can say, okay, I want more reverb. So we have our 4 aux ends that we could access right here. So let's say, okay, I want a delay. You know, we could just have a multi-delay on send 2. So when you go to the mixer, back to the agent, we could just have all of your effect sends as we can hear the effects. So yeah, each pad you could have, you know, inserts and send effects within the Groove Agent mixer, or send it to multiple outputs and have those in the Cubase mixer as well. All right, so we see from Audi and Lee says, great, thank you for your patience. The longer we watch you work, the more we understand. I'm glad it was helpful. You can watch me have a brain cramp. But all right. All right. All right. So we see Charles K joining. Great to have you on. Hope you're well. See Tim K says, Greg's improvised drum machine sounds give me happy feet. All right, David Blue says, with VaryAudio, can I have a visual of several events from different tracks in a single window and edit them at the same time? So you'd edit kind of one part at a time, but you could see multiple parts. So let's say if we're here, and I'll just kind of change event colors. Let's say if we have background vocals going on here, let me just, so right now, or I'll just leave it the same colors, but I'm going to select all of these and go into VariAudio. I'll go to like a full screen view, and we can see that I could have all of my different voices here.
Hey, don't it make you feel good?
So, and now what we could do is just kind of switch between which is the active part. And if you only want to see all clips on the active track, so you could just come over here and say, okay, or just by kind of clicking on the different parts. So you can say, okay, now I'm editing this particular voice. So if we come over here, let's just, so we can say, okay, let's, and then I click here, we could switch to a different voice for editing. So I could see, so we can see, okay, how will that sound?
Feel good.
All right, so.
Feel good.
And then I want to edit this harmony voice. So you can say,
Knowing that somebody loves you. Somebody loves you.
so now we could just,
Somebody loves you. Don't
and if I want to hear it in context of everything,
nobody loves you.
so you could just kind of, open up, switch between your different parts here, and then, or just kind of click on the particular voice. You'll see kind of their colors, and each one can have kind of a different color. And once you click, that particular voice kind of pops up, and you could colorize based on, the channel color, based on scales, based, on the event colors as well. So if we have different event colors, you could see those reflected as well. So if I come here, let's say I'll switch colors. So now when we edit, and we go into VariAudio, we could just choose the color scheme based on the event. So now as I go to edit, we could have our different event colors automatically reflected just like that. All right. All right, wonderful. See Graham Witcher on. I think he was on earlier. Just want to say hi. All right. We see Steven says, thanks, Greg. Most helpful. All right. All right. Leonardo Sants asks, can you explain the right way to use the project root key from the toolbar? Sometimes I'm not sure if I should set it at the start or later. How does it affect the project if I use it? So a lot of times it won't really affect the particular project unless, like, if you've recorded audio, if you put a project root key in that's different than the audio, it's not going to really have an impact unless you've specified that particular root key in the file. Where the project root key comes in really handy is when we are kind of building up more, let's say, harmonic based loops. So let's say if you don't see the project root key, you could right click and activate your project root key here. So let's say I want my project root key to be in D. So I want to start with some drum loops. So let's say I want to build a quick project here. So let's get to some loops. And so we'll start off. Okay, so I have this loop, and this loop, we have told it to, to be in musical mode. So now when we do this, I could audition loops at its tempo. It adds the tempo of the project. So if I adjust my tempo of the project down to 90 beats a minute from 120, when we go to audition, it's now going to audition at the project tempo. So if I say, okay, 96 beats a minute, all right, so we have this drum loop, and if I wanted to say, oh, maybe what would it sound like if it was double time or half time? Or I wanted to actually put it into tape machine style, and if I pitch it, if I speed it up, that way the pitch rises, or if I slow it down, the pitch will decrease like analog tape. And now when we have this, we could say link to the transpose track. All right, so now if we have our project root key, let's say we don't have it set to anything, and I want to now find like a part. So I'm going to play this particular loop here. We'll put this on loop. All right, I'll speed it up. All right, so let's say I want to now come over to, like, let's throw in some guitar stuff. So we'll go to the Pro Instrument bundle. So let's say, okay, I want like a blues guitar. So we can see that this is in A minor. So let's say I want this to be in D. All right, so now if I go to audition, so we could say, okay, this, so when I turn this on, so this is playing in its natural key of, looks like A minor, okay, but I have my project root key set to D here. So when I drag this file in, we're listening to it in A minor. And now when I play it, because we have our project root key set to D, we could have that kind of automatically follow based on, so as we drag this file in, it's now going to automatically follow the project root key, even though this was in A. So if I now switch this to the key of G, it will kind of take the tonality of this. So we could think of the project root keys being really helpful for like taking audio loops and samples that are kind of, harmonically based and where the pitch is already determined. And that's part of the metadata of the file. And then when you drop that in, it will automatically conform to the project root key. You could do it to your own tracks if you want to, but you'd have to go in and add that metadata. So adding the project root key won't affect an existing track, but it's great for kind of starting off with new projects, and you want all the loops to kind of make musical harmonic sense. All right, so we see Gareth fed his daughter lasagna. Sounds like a good choice. Right. So we see Sable just says, I think MuseScore can create a music XML for that, and never actually used it, but subscribed. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if it does scanning or not. So, all right. All right, so see Lee Pendleton says, cheers, Greg. All right. Gareth wants everyone to loop the like button. All right. All right. Reading through comments here about Spock's beard. All right. Jack Bourne says, when do we get to see your Stream Deck setup? So I think I'm spending maybe like an hour or two just kind of proofreading, like make sure I didn't type anything in wrong. But currently I have like, I think maybe like 20 or so advanced mapping pages, every Cubase menu function mapped. So maybe I could show it a bit on the next Zoom meetup. So. Okay. All right, so let me jump to a question that we had kind of mailed in advance. All right, this came from Facebook, but I thought it'd be good to show here. It says, I'm trying to use a Project Logical Editor to mute, unmute certain events on a track. I've color-coded these events so the Logical Editor can filter these, locating them by color. Then select and mute/unmute these events as I would do manually by right-clicking over the event and selecting and clicking the X mute tool. I want to automate this behavior. I've set up the following filters in the Project Logical Editor. It says I'm quite familiar with the Boolean logic, so setting up a conditional statement is not a problem. It's the awkward way which Cubase has implemented the editor. It should be nice if we could record a sequence of steps and save that as a macro/key command. So far, I can't get Cubase to transform any event on the selected track. I suspect color name may only be relevant to the track and not to the event. I could be wrong. I'll keep working at it, but if anyone has a bright idea, great. Thanks. Okay, so I think in this case, and I have made a Project Logical Editor preset for this, so I will just. Okay. Okay, so in this case, let's say the user went through and had basically split different parts and assigned them a color and wanted to kind of mute the particular color. So let's say if we come over here. All right, so, and what they wanted to do is if it fell to a particular color, they wanted to mute the particular events of that color on the selected track. All right, so we'll just say color 1, which is the red color, and I'll duplicate this track a couple times, and let's offset. All right, let me just. All right, so the goal is to, on this selected track, to take every event that is red, color 1 in this case, and it could be any color really, and to mute it on the selected track, but not the other tracks. And sometimes, so what I did is I did a pre-process. So I said we want to basically show only the selected channels. So if I come here, we could say, we go to the configurations. One of the presets that you have is to show only selected tracks. So that kind of hides that. And then what we want to do to make this on the track level, we're going to, so we only have one track in like a multi-track process as we do this. And we're going to select every audio or MIDI event that is color 1, in this case the red. And then what we want to do is to edit, mute the events, and then we're going to undo the channel visibility configuration. All right, so let's come back over here and see. So we'll show all of our tracks. So in this case, only these particular red events will be muted. So as we do this, let's run the project logical editor. So this track is selected, so it shouldn't affect these particular tracks. And it will kind of hide the track, do the process, mute the events, and then undo the track visibility configuration. So when I hit apply, if everything did everything correctly, we could see that it comes off pretty seamlessly, that those particular red colored events on that track will now be muted just like that. So that's how you could do that. So again, we could come over and say we want to hide all the other tracks except this one, and that allows you to only do the color selection on that one particular track. We're going to select all MIDI and audio events that are color 1, and once you pick the color here, you could see by color. We're going to mute those particular events and then come over here and then show all the tracks again, and all that goes on in kind of an automatic way. So kind of in the blink of an eye, the red colored events on that selected track are muted. All right, so we had another question I saw about like how to do ripple editing, and this is someone was wondering how we could do it because they didn't think Cubase could do it and our program could. So when we come over, we can say, so there's a couple of different ways. One is just to kind of come over here. I think if you hold down Control-Shift-X, that would automatically move the events over. So if we delete like that range, that information stays in time. If we hit Control or Command plus Shift plus X, we can now have that space gone and all those tracks kind of shift over. Now, if we switch our grid mode here to shuffle, I could also just, without having to split the event, I could take just the range, and then when I hit delete, then that would automatically kind of do a ripple edit for you as well. So when in shuffle mode, you could select a range and then just hit the delete, and that would automatically split that as well. Now, when we're in shuffle mode, we could also just very easily rearrange clips. So if I wanted to change the order, we see that I have a yellow event followed by a red event here. So if I wanted to quickly kind of flip those around, we could do that just by dragging this over to the right, and we could flip the positions also while in shuffle mode. All right, let's jump back to see if we have more live questions. Thanks for sending questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we see from Flyv says, what's the easiest way to see multiple tracks in different colors in the key editor? Okay, so let's jump back to let me find here. We'll just do this little sleigh ride piece. All right, so I can see that these tracks here One, the tracks are different colors and the events are different colors, which is pretty typical. But if I wanted to look at all the events here, let's go into our key editor. And then if we choose to just colorize by part, then each of the events here will have their own distinct colors from the event. So again, just go to the part editor. That way, there's lots of composers that, it's always like, oh, low notes are always this frequency. Violins are always this color. And then people, and some people that have, I think, what is it called, synesthesia, where, when they hear a sound, they definitely hear color, and their brain will visualize colors to be associated with that particular sound. So those people will be like very picky about which colors make sense, and just can't understand why, someone else sees bass frequencies differently than them. So, but just kind of select all of the particular events in the key editor. And then when you go to the color choices, you could color by velocity, pitch, channel, or part. So if you want each of those if they're all on different MIDI channels, these are all kind of on the same MIDI channel, going to different instruments, but now we can see the part colors are automatically carried over into the key editor. Great. All right, Contemplate Music asks, how much do I lose by using Halion Sonic versus Halion? Same with Groove Agent. Are they lighter on CPU, RAM? I usually load full versions of all instruments, but is it wise? If you have the full versions, like with Groove Agent, you're going to get like the performance controls. So if you want to do like note repeat type functionality, you could do that very easily inside of the full Groove Agent, plus the ability to have multiple instruments. If you're just playing back sounds, I don't think there's much difference between Halion and Halion Sonic, other than you could run 64 instruments at once in one instance of Halion, and 16 in Halion Sonic. But if you're sampling instruments, if you are designing instruments, those are things that aren't available in Halion Sonic. You think of it as kind of like the playback side for Halion libraries. But if you want to make your own library and be able to kind of get behind, like kind of crack, get more depth of editing, then Halion would do that. But if you're not like going through and adjusting the oscillators and, the modulation matrix in Halion Sonic, if you're doing those types of things, then Halion makes sense. If you're like, okay, I just pull up this sound and I'm playing it, it's great, I don't need to tweak it to like a granular level, then, Halion Sonic would be sufficient. All right. See, Uno Memento says it's time for him to enjoy some melodic dreams. Thanks for joining us today. Okay. See, Michael Pierce has made it back. See, Gobe Berg just says the grid shuffle mode is brilliant. I love how Steinberg implemented it. All right, so we can see Contemplate Music just says, thank you, Greg, for all your answers today. Very helpful. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that kind of sneak in. It's a Friday, one of the last Fridays before most of us in the Northern Hemisphere have to go back to work and school and normal responsibilities of autumn and fall. All right, let's give it another minute, see if there's other questions pop in. usually about 30 seconds from when I talk. Let's see. So you see Michael Pierce just says bank holiday weekend in the UK. He's a self-employed person. It's either a day I work for free or I just don't work. Yeah, I was going to have a meeting on Monday with one of my colleagues based outside of London. So he's like, oh, it's a holiday. So I'm like, okay, so we're going to do it on Tuesday. We have kind of our end of summer holiday in the United States the following week, the following Friday, or following Monday. All right, see, we're giving our 10 or 15 seconds, see if there's any other questions that pop in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. I hope that everyone has learned some new tips and tricks. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button, tell your friends, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. See, Michael Fear says, we do weird things with dates here. So. All right, so it looks like we are all set with questions. I want to thank everyone again for all the wonderful questions. If you learned something, that's great. That's why we do these things. We will see everyone back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right, so we see, I'll send over some more logical editor presets for you guys to. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday, and then next Friday, 1 week from today, will be our Zoom social. It's always a lot of fun. So look forward to seeing everyone who's normally on, plus new faces. It's a great way to meet people that are on the live streams. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Goodbye.